Robert stood by the refreshment table, nursing a glass of sparkling water as he observed the charity gala from a safe distance. At 52, he felt out of place among the glittering crowd, but his company had sponsored the event, making his appearance mandatory. The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel buzzed with conversation and laughter as Portland's elite mingled, checkbooks at the ready for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. 28 years had passed since Robert had held his newborn daughter, just one precious hour before the social worker had taken her away. After his wife Diane died during childbirth, he'd fallen apart completely. No job, no support system, drowning in medical bills. What kind of life could he offer a baby? The adoption had been closed at his request. A clean break seemed kinder than a lifetime of inadequate fatherhood. He'd built himself back up over the decades, becoming successful beyond his wildest dreams. But that wound had never fully healed. Robert checked his watch. He'd made an appearance, written a sizable check, and could probably slip away unnoticed in another 15 minutes. That's when he saw her. Sophia moved through the crowd with natural grace, stopping to chat with various guests. Something about her immediately caught Robert's attention. Not just her beauty, though she was certainly beautiful with her dark curls and warm smile. There was something familiar about her, something he couldn't quite place. When she laughed, at something an elderly gentleman said, Robert felt an odd tug of recognition. "You look like you're planning your escape route," a voice said beside him. Robert turned to find Sophia standing there, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Up close, she was even more striking. "Is it that obvious?" he asked, surprised to find himself smiling. "Only to a fellow escape artist," she replied. "I've been mapping exit strategies since I arrived. I'm Sophia Chen, by the way. I work in the hospital's pediatric ward." "Robert Thompson. My company donated some equipment to your department last year." "Wait, Thompson Technologies? That Robert Thompson?" Her eyes widened. "Your VR therapy systems have been incredible for our long-term patients. The kids absolutely love them." Robert felt a flush of pride. "That's wonderful to hear. The VR program was actually my pet project." They fell into easy conversation. Robert found himself sharing stories about his company's beginnings that he rarely discussed with anyone. Sophia listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest, rather than the networking-focused queries he usually encountered at these events. "What made you choose pediatric nursing?" he asked after a while. A shadow crossed her face briefly. "I was adopted as a baby. My parents were wonderful, but I always wondered about my birth family. I guess working with children is my way of connecting with something I missed." Robert felt a pang in his chest. "That couldn't have been easy." "It has its moments," she admitted. "My adoption was closed, so I don't know much about my birth parents. My adoptive parents told me my mother died during childbirth, and my father couldn't raise me alone." Robert froze, his glass halfway to his lips. The coincidence was unsettling, but he quickly reminded himself that such stories weren't uncommon. Still, something stirred in his memory, a sense of déjà vu so powerful it left him momentarily speechless. "Are you all right?" Sophia asked, concern in her voice. "Yes, sorry. Just reminded me of someone I used to know," he said vaguely. They spoke for nearly 2 hours, neither noticing as the gala thinned around them. When they finally parted, Robert had Sophia's phone number and plans to meet for coffee the following week. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He found himself digging through old boxes in his attic at 3 a.m, searching for the single photo he'd kept of his daughter. But the small box where he'd stored it was missing, likely lost in one of his many moves over the years. All he had were fragmented memories, tiny fingers gripping his thumb, dark wisps of hair, eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond their hours. Coffee with Sophia turned into dinner the following weekend. Dinner led to a gallery opening, which led to a hiking trip along the Columbia River Gorge. Despite their 24-year age gap, conversation flowed effortlessly between them. Robert found himself laughing more than he had in years. "You know what's strange?" Sophia said as they watched the sunset from Vista House one evening. I feel like I've known you forever. Is that weird to say? Robert shook his head. I've felt the same way since we met. Like we've met before, in another life maybe. My adopted mom would say we're kindred spirits, Sophia smiled. She believes some souls recognize each other across time. As autumn turned to winter, they grew closer. Robert introduced Sophia to his passion for astronomy, setting up his telescope on clear nights to show her the wonders of the night sky. Sophia taught Robert to make her adoptive grandmother's famous dumplings, laughing as he struggled to get the pleats right. One evening, as they sat in Robert's living room sharing stories from their past, Sophia mentioned she was born in Portland. What, hospital? Robert asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Legacy, Emmanuel, I think. Why? Just curious, he said, but his heart was racing. That was where Diane had died, where his daughter had been born. But it was one of the largest hospitals in the city. Thousands of babies were born there every year. I've been thinking about searching for my birth father, Sophia said quietly, staring into her wine glass. My adoption counselor says it's a complicated process with closed adoptions, but not impossible. Robert set down his glass carefully. Do you think that's wise? He might not want to be found. I know, that's what's held me back all these years. She looked up at him, her eyes searching. What would you do in my position? The question hung in the air between them. Robert thought about his daughter somewhere out in the world, perhaps wondering about him as Sophia wondered about her father. Would she want to find him? Would she hate him for giving her up? I think, he began slowly, that people make the best decisions they can with the information they have at the time. Whatever your birth father's reasons, I doubt giving you up was easy. Sophia reached across the couch and squeezed his hand. Thank you for understanding. Most people just tell me to leave the past behind. As months passed, their relationship deepened. The age difference that had initially concerned Robert seemed to matter less and less. Sophia brought light and laughter back into his life, while he offered stability and perspective that she valued. The strange sense of familiarity never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, a comfortable feeling of rightness when they were together. Neither could have imagined the truth waiting to be discovered, or how their lives would change on what was meant to be the happiest day of their lives. For now, they simply enjoyed the connection they'd found, two souls unaware they were bound by more than just affection, moving inevitably toward a revelation that would transform everything. 6. Months into their relationship, Robert knew Sophia was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Their age difference, which had initially made him hesitant, now seemed insignificant compared to the deep connection they shared. On quiet evenings at his lakeside home, they would talk for hours about everything and nothing, comfortable silences, falling between them that needed no filling. Have you ever thought about settling down? Sophia asked one night as they sat on his deck, watching stars reflect on the still water. You know, the whole package. Marriage. Maybe even kids? Robert took a sip of his whiskey, considering her question. I was married once a long time ago, he said quietly. Her name was Diane. Sophia turned to him surprised. You never mentioned that before. It was brief. We were young, just starting out. She died during childbirth. The words still hurt, even after all these years. Oh, Robert. Sophia placed her hand over his. I'm so sorry. And the baby? He stared out at the dark water. A girl. I wasn't in a good place. No job, drowning in medical bills. I gave her up for adoption. That must have been incredibly difficult, Sophia said softly. Hardest thing I've ever done, he admitted. I've thought about her every day since. She'd be about your age now. Sophia leaned against his shoulder. Do you ever think about finding her? I've considered it. But her adoption was closed, at my request. I thought it would be easier that way. A clean break. He sighed. Now, I'm not so sure. Maybe she's out there looking for you too, Sophia suggested. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Robert couldn't stop thinking about what Sophia had said. Was his daughter searching for him? Would she understand why he'd made the choice he had? And most importantly, would she forgive him? The following weekend, Robert took Sophia to the coast. They walked along the beach at sunset, waves lapping at their feet. He'd been carrying the small velvet box in his pocket all day, waiting for the perfect moment. "Do you remember the first night we met?" he asked, stopping to face her as the orange sun sank toward the horizon. Sophia smiled. "The charity gala. You were hiding by the refreshment table, planning your escape. And then you appeared, and suddenly, I didn't want to leave." He took her hands in his. "I've been alone for most of my life, Sophia. I convinced myself that was how it had to be. And then you walked into my life and changed everything." Her eyes widened as he dropped to one knee, on the wet sand, pulling out the small box. "I know I'm older, and maybe this seems fast, but when something feels this right, why wait? Sophia Chen, will you marry me?" The ring caught the last rays of sunlight as he opened the box, a vintage emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, elegant without being flashy. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, of course I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into his arms. As they kissed, a strange feeling washed over him. Not just happiness, but something deeper. A sense of coming home, of pieces falling into place. The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. They decided on a small ceremony at Robert's lake house with just their closest friends and Sophia's adoptive parents, David and Linda Chen. Robert had no family to invite. His parents had passed years ago, and he'd been an only child. "What, about April 18th? Sophia asked one evening as they sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by wedding planning books and sample menus. "It's a Saturday, and the weather should be nice." Robert checked his calendar. "April 18th works for me." Sophia made a note, then hesitated. "There's something I've been thinking about a lot lately." "What's that?" "I want to try finding my birth father before the wedding," she said, looking up at him. "I've already started the process. My adoption counselor is helping me navigate the legal channels." Robert felt his stomach tighten. "Why now?" "I've always wanted to know where I came from, and with us getting married, starting this new chapter, it feels like the right time to close that circle." She reached for his hand. "Would that bother you?" He forced a smile. "Of course not. I want you to have answers, if that's what you need." But that night, as Sophia slept beside him, Robert lay, awake, troubled. What were the chances? Thousands of babies were given up for adoption every year. Portland was a big city. The timing matched, but surely it was just a coincidence. Still, the nagging doubt wouldn't leave him. The next morning, he called an old friend who worked as a lawyer specializing in family law. "Hypothetically," Robert asked carefully, "if someone gave a child up for closed adoption, is there any way they could find out who adopted them?" "Not easily," his friend replied. "Closed adoptions are designed to protect the privacy of all parties. Records are sealed." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Robert said. "My fiancée was adopted, and she's looking for her birth parents. Well, it's easier for adoptees to find birth parents than vice versa, but still challenging. Some states have made the process simpler in recent years, but it usually requires mutual consent." After hanging up, Robert tried to push his concerns aside. The odds were astronomical. But something kept nagging at him. Little things Sophia said or did that reminded him of Diane, the strange familiarity he'd felt from their first meeting. As the wedding date approached, Sophia threw herself into preparations while continuing her search. Each time she mentioned making progress, Robert felt a mixture of dread and hope. Part of him wanted her to find what she was looking for. Another part feared what that discovery might mean. One evening, as they addressed invitation envelopes at his dining room table, Sophia looked up suddenly. "What hospital did you say your wife died in?" The question caught him off guard. "Legacy, Emmanuel." "Why?" "That's where I was born." She shook her head. "Sorry, just another strange coincidence." Robert's hand trembled slightly as he picked up his pen again. The coincidences were piling up, becoming harder to dismiss. 2 months before the wedding, Sophia's adoptive parents came to dinner at Robert's house. They were warm, kind people who had clearly given Sophia a wonderful life. As Linda helped him prepare dessert in the kitchen, she mentioned how grateful they'd always been to Sophia's birth father. The social worker told us he stayed with her for an hour after she was born, Linda said softly, glancing toward the dining room where Sophia and David were deep in conversation. Held her, talked to her, made sure she knew she was loved before letting her go. I've always thought that was incredibly brave. Robert nearly dropped the plates he was holding. That's exactly what he'd done with his daughter. Held her for one precious hour, trying to memorize every detail of her tiny face before the social worker came to take her away. The hardest thing, Linda continued, was explaining to Sophia why her birth certificate had no father listed. The adoption agency told us he'd requested complete anonymity. Robert's heart pounded. He'd made that exact request, wanting to give his daughter the freedom of a completely fresh start. That night, after everyone had gone, Robert searched through his home office until he found an old filing box. Inside, buried beneath decades of paperwork, was a yellowed envelope. His hands shook as he opened it, pulling out the single photo he'd kept, a Polaroid of himself holding his newborn daughter, her tiny face barely visible among the hospital blankets. On the back, in faded blue ink, was written, "Robert and baby girl, April 18, 1996. April 18th, the very date Sophia had chosen for their wedding." Robert sank into his chair, the photo clutched in his hand. The coincidences had become too numerous, too specific to ignore. But he needed to be certain before saying anything to Sophia. If he was wrong, he could destroy their relationship for nothing. And if he was right, he tucked the photo back into the envelope and locked it in his desk drawer. Tomorrow, he would call the adoption agency, see what information he could legally obtain. Until then, he would keep his suspicions to himself. After all, what were the chances? In a city of millions, what were the odds that his daughter would find her way back to him, not knowing who he really was? Yet as he climbed the stairs to join Sophia in bed, a chill ran down his spine. Perhaps some part of him had always known. Perhaps that was the true source of the immediate connection he'd felt with her. Not romantic chemistry, but the enduring bond between parent and child. A week before the wedding, Sophia sat at her kitchen table, staring at an email from her adoption counselor, Nancy. After months of paperwork, waiting, and more paperwork, the message she'd been hoping for had finally arrived. "Good news. We've located some records about your birth parents. I've attached what I could legally obtain. Call me if you want to discuss next steps." With trembling fingers, Sophia downloaded the attached files. The first was her original birth certificate, something she'd never seen before. Her breath caught as she read the details. Mother, Diane Thompson, deceased. Father, Robert Thompson. Robert Thompson. She stared at the name, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. It had to be a coincidence. Thompson was a common last name. There must be hundreds of Robert Thompsons in Portland alone. But the date of birth, April 18, 1996, was too specific to ignore. The same date they'd chosen for their wedding. The second attachment was a scan of hospital records noting that the father had held the baby for 1 hour before signing the adoption papers. There was a photograph, too, grainy and faded. A much younger Robert holding a newborn, his face both tender and devastated. Sophia ran to the bathroom and threw up. When she could breathe again, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. Had some part of her always known? Was that why she'd felt so drawn to him from the beginning? She called her adoptive mother, barely able to form words through her tears. "Mom, I need you to come over right now, please." Linda arrived 20 minutes later to find Sophia surrounded by printouts and old photos, her engagement ring placed in the center of the table. "He's my father," Sophia said hollowly as her mother walked in. "Robert is my biological father." Linda sank into a chair, her face draining of color. That's not possible. Look. Sophia pushed the birth certificate toward her. Robert Thompson. The right age, the right date, the right hospital. It's him, Mom. I'm engaged to my own father. Linda read through the documents, shaking her head in disbelief. Oh, Sophia, what are you going to do? I don't know, she whispered. How do I even begin this conversation? Hey, guess what I found out today? They sat in stunned silence for several minutes before Linda spoke again. You need to talk to him, she said gently. Tonight, before this goes any further. Sophia nodded numbly. I know. After her mother left, Sophia paced her apartment, rehearsing what to say, how to approach the impossible topic. Nothing sounded right. How did one prepare for a conversation like this? At 7 o'clock, she drove to Robert's house, the folder of documents on the passenger seat beside her. Her engagement ring remained on her kitchen table, a reminder of what could never be. Robert greeted her at the door with a smile that faded as soon as he saw her face. What's wrong? He asked, leading her into the living room. We need to talk, Sophia said, her voice steadier than she expected. I got information from the adoption agency today. Something flickered in Robert's eyes. Fear, recognition, she couldn't tell which. What did you find out? Instead of answering, she handed him the folder. He took it slowly, like it might bite him, and sank onto the couch. Sophia remained, standing, arms wrapped around herself as if for protection. Robert opened the folder and began reading. His face went ashen. I've suspected for a while, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Too many coincidences. The hospital, your birth date, things you say that remind me of Diane. He looked up at her, eyes filled with tears. I found an old photo yesterday of me holding my baby girl. I was going to call the agency this morning, but I got caught up in work and... So it's true, Sophia said. You're my birth father. Robert nodded, unable to speak. The reality of the situation crashed over them both. The romantic dinners, the kisses, the nights spent together, all of it took on a horrifying new context. I think I'm going to be sick, Sophia whispered, rushing to the bathroom. When she returned, Robert was still sitting motionless, staring at the documents. I should go, she said, picking up her purse. Wait. Robert stood. Please. I know this is... There aren't even words for what this is. But we need to talk about it. What is there to say? The wedding is obviously off. We need to call everyone, cancel everything. Sophia's practical nature took over, focusing on logistics to avoid confronting the emotional hurricane. Sit down, Robert said softly. Please. Just for a minute. Reluctantly, she perched on the edge of an armchair, as far from him as possible. I've thought about you every day for 28 years, Robert began. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. I wondered what you looked like, if you were happy, if your adoptive parents were good to you. They were, Sophia said. Automatically. They are. I'm glad. He took a deep breath. The day you were born was both the best and worst day of my life. Diane died during delivery, an amniotic fluid embolism. 1 minute she was there, squeezing my hand. The next, everything was chaos. Sophia had never heard the full story of her birth. Her adoptive parents had only told her that her birth mother died, and her father couldn't care for her. They let me hold you for an hour, Robert continued, his voice breaking. 1 hour to memorize your face, to tell you how much I loved you, how sorry I was. I was 24, unemployed because I'd quit my job to take care of Diane during her difficult pregnancy. The medical bills were astronomical. I had no family to help, no resources. Why didn't you list yourself on the birth certificate? Sophia asked. I thought it would be easier for you to have a completely fresh start. No ties, no complications. The social worker said it might make the adoption process smoother. He ran a hand through his hair. I've questioned that decision countless times over the years. A heavy silence fell between them. The grandfather, clock in the hallway, ticked loudly, marking the seconds of their new impossible reality. When we met at the gala, Sophia finally said. Did you know? No, not consciously, but there was something familiar about you from the first moment. I thought it was just attraction. He winced at the word. Now I wonder if some part of me recognized you on a deeper level. I felt it too, Sophia admitted. That instant, connection, it felt like coming home. Robert nodded. Because it was. You were coming home, in a way I never could have imagined. What do we do now? Sophia asked, the question hanging heavy in the air between them. I don't know, Robert answered, honestly. But whatever happens next, I want you to know I'm grateful for these months we've had together, even with everything we know now. Finding you again, getting to know the amazing woman you've become. It's more than I ever dared hope for. Sophia felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I need time to process all of this. Of course. Robert stood. Take all the time you need, but please don't disappear from my life again, not now that I've found you. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As she drove home that night, Sophia's mind raced through the implications of their discovery. The wedding would need to be canceled, guests notified, deposits forfeited. She would have to explain to friends, colleagues, everyone who knew about her engagement, though certainly not the real reason. But beneath the practical concerns, a deeper question emerged. What kind of relationship could they have now? The romantic love they'd shared was impossible, tainted by their blood connection. Yet the bond between them remained, transformed into something different, but no less powerful. When she arrived home, Sophia found her mother waiting for her. How did it go? Linda asked, rising from the couch. About as well as could be expected, Sophia replied, collapsing beside her. He didn't know either, not for certain, but he suspected, just like I somehow did without realizing it. Linda put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. What happens now? Sophia stared at the engagement ring still sitting on her kitchen table, catching the light despite the darkness of the revelation it now represented. I don't know, she said truthfully. But I think I just found my father and lost my fiancé. And somehow I have to figure out how to be okay with both of those things at once. 3 days passed with no contact between Sophia and Robert. She had called in sick to work, spending most of her time curled up on her couch, alternating between crying and staring blankly at the wall. Her phone buzzed constantly with wedding-related messages, the florist confirming final arrangements, friends asking about bachelorette party details, the caterer requesting the final head count. She ignored them all. On the 4th day, David and Linda came over with groceries and gentle but firm instructions to shower and eat something. As Sophia picked at a sandwich her mother had made, David broached the subject they'd been avoiding. Sweetheart, the wedding is in 4 days. People will be arriving from out of town tomorrow. We need to decide what to do. Sophia set down her sandwich. I know, I don't even know where to begin. Have you spoken to Robert? Linda asked. No. What would I say? Hey, Dad, sorry we almost got married? The word dad felt strange on her tongue, foreign, yet somehow right. David leaned forward. You have 2 options as I see it. Cancel everything and deal with the questions later, or what? Sophia asked when he hesitated. Or use the occasion for something else. People are coming anyway. The venue is paid for. The food is ordered. Sophia stared at him. What are you suggesting? That we go through with it? Not as a wedding, Linda clarified quickly, but maybe as, I don't know, a different kind of celebration. Like what? A surprise? He's actually my father party? Sophia's laugh held no humor. More like a reunion, David said quietly. A chance to introduce Robert to the people in your life as who he really is. Sophia considered this. The thought of canceling everything and hiding away was tempting, but the practical side of her, the side that had helped her thrive as a nurse, recognized the wisdom in her adoptive father's suggestion. Guests were coming, Deposits were non-refundable, and more importantly, she and Robert would eventually need to figure out what kind of relationship they could have now. "I need to talk to him first," she said finally. After her parents left, Sophia sat on her balcony watching the sunset, her phone in hand. Finally, she typed a simple message. "Can we talk tomorrow about the wedding?" Robert's reply came almost instantly. "Yes, whenever and wherever you're comfortable." They met at a quiet coffee shop halfway between their homes. Sophia arrived first, claiming a corner table away from other customers. When Robert walked in, she was struck by how tired he looked, like he'd aged years in just a few days. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sitting across from her. "We need to decide what to do," Sophia replied, jumping straight to the point. "The wedding is in 3 days. People are expecting—" "I've been thinking about that," Robert said. "I've drafted an email canceling everything, explaining that we've had a change of heart. I haven't sent it yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Sophia wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "My dad, David, suggested something different." She explained the idea of transforming the wedding into another type of gathering. Robert listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "It could work," he said when she finished. "But only if you're comfortable with it. This has been a lot to process." "That's an understatement," Sophia replied with a small smile, the first she'd managed in days. "But I think he might be right. Canceling means questions, rumors, concerned friends showing up at my door. This way we control the narrative." "What? Would we tell people?" Sophia had been considering this question all morning. "The truth, but not all of it. We say that we discovered we're related, distant cousins or something. Close enough that a romantic relationship isn't appropriate, but not so close that people ask too many questions." Robert nodded slowly. "And that instead of canceling, we decided to use the occasion to celebrate finding each other. A family reunion of sorts." "Exactly." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging between them. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia said finally. "If you had known from the beginning who I was, what would you have done?" Robert's eyes grew distant. "I've asked myself that 100 times this week. I would have told you immediately, of course, and then I would have hoped you'd give me a chance to know you as your father." "I think I would have," Sophia said softly. Another silence fell, more comfortable than the last. "So we're doing this?" Robert asked. "Turning our wedding into a reunion?" "I think so," Sophia agreed. "But we'll need help. My parents, your friends, someone to help spread the word to guests." By that evening, they had assembled a small team of confidants: Sophia's parents, Robert's best friend Thomas, and Sophia's roommate from nursing school, Lily. They gathered in Robert's living room, the wedding plan spread across his coffee table. "Let me get this straight," Thomas said after they'd explained the situation. "You want to turn your wedding into a father-daughter reunion party without telling anyone the whole truth?" "That's the general idea," Robert confirmed. "We'll say we discovered we're distant relatives, decided not to get married but wanted to celebrate finding each other." "And you need us to help inform the guests," Linda added. "Yes," Sophia said, "as tactfully as possible." David picked up the guest list. "We should divide this up. Linda and I can contact our friends and family. Thomas, you take Robert's contacts. Lily, you handle Sophia's friends." "What about the wedding party?" Lily asked. "They'll have questions." "I'll talk to them personally," Sophia said. "They deserve that much." They spent the next 2 hours assigning tasks and crafting the message they would share. The story was simple. During wedding preparations, Sophia and Robert had discovered they were distant relatives. After the initial shock, they decided to use their wedding day to celebrate their newfound family connection instead. As their friends left, promising to begin calls first thing in the morning, Sophia found herself alone with Robert for the first time since their coffee shop meeting. "Thank you," she said, "for being willing to do this." "Of course," he replied, "though I should be thanking you. Most people would have just walked away. I thought about it, Sophia admitted. But then I realized I've been looking for you my whole life. Not as a partner, obviously, but as my father. Now that I've found you, I don't want to lose you again. Robert's eyes filled with tears. I never thought I'd get the chance to be your dad, even if it's decades later than it should have been. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Calls were made, arrangements adjusted. The wedding cake was replaced with a more appropriate celebration cake. The DJ was briefed on the change of atmosphere. Sophia's white dress was returned to the boutique, and she purchased a simple blue one instead. Some guests were confused, others curious, but most accepted the explanation with minimal questions. A few distant friends and acquaintances chose not to attend given the changed circumstances, but the majority confirmed they would still come. The night before what should have been their wedding, Sophia sat with her adoptive parents in their living room, a strange calm having settled over her. Are you ready for tomorrow? Linda asked. I think so, Sophia replied. It's not exactly how I pictured introducing my birth father to everyone, but then again, nothing about this situation is normal. David squeezed her hand. You're handling this with incredible grace, sweetheart. Both of you are. We don't really have a choice, Sophia said. But I've been thinking, maybe this was always how it was supposed to happen. Maybe I was meant to find him this way. Through an engagement? Linda asked skeptically. No, not that part, Sophia laughed. But meeting as equals, getting to know each other as people first. If I'd found him through the adoption agency, we would have been strangers trying to force a father-daughter relationship. This way, we already have a foundation, it's just changing shape. As she drove home that night, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for the relationship she'd lost, anxiety about the day ahead, but also a glimmer of hope. Tomorrow would not be her wedding day as planned, but it would be something equally significant. The first day of knowing her father not as Robert her fiancé, but as Robert her dad. The first day of a relationship they should have had all along. April 18th dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day every bride dreams of for her wedding. Except Sophia was no longer a bride, and this was no longer a wedding. As mom, she stood in what should have been her bridal suite at Robert's lake house. She smoothed down her simple blue dress and took a deep breath. You look beautiful, Linda said, adjusting a stray curl in Sophia's hair. Thanks, Mom. Sophia turned from the mirror. Is everyone here? Most of them. A few people are still arriving. Linda hesitated. How are you feeling? Nervous. But okay. Sophia picked up the small bouquet of white daisies she'd chosen to replace her elaborate bridal flowers. It's strange. A week ago I thought today would be the happiest day of my life for one reason. Now it might still be, just for a completely different one. Downstairs, guests mingled on the lawn overlooking the lake, confusion evident in their hushed conversations. The white chairs were arranged in a semicircle rather than straight rows. There was no altar, no wedding arch, just a simple podium. The string quartet played softly, but their selection had changed from wedding marches to gentle classical pieces. Robert stood near the house, greeting arrivals and fielding questions with practiced responses. Yes, quite a surprise for us both. No, we're doing fine. Thank you for understanding. We're just grateful for the chance to celebrate in a different way. Thomas approached, handing Robert a glass of water. Holding up okay? Better than I expected, Robert admitted. The story seems to be working. Most people are just relieved we're not at each other's throats. And how are things between you two, really? Robert watched a pair of ducks glide across the lake. We're finding our way. It's complicated. I can imagine. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're both handling this with remarkable grace. At noon, when the ceremony had been scheduled to begin, David stepped to the podium and gently tapped the microphone. Friends and family, thank you all for coming today. As you know, the occasion has changed somewhat, but we're grateful you're here to share it with us nonetheless. He smiled at the assembled guests. I'd like to invite Robert and Sophia to come forward now. Robert walked to the front alone, his steps measured and deliberate. Then Sophia emerged from the house escorted by Linda. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She looked beautiful, but nothing like a traditional bride in her knee-length blue dress and simple hairstyle. They met in the center of the semicircle, standing side by side rather than facing each other. Robert took the microphone first. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I know this isn't what you expected when you received your invitations, and we appreciate your flexibility and understanding." He turned slightly toward Sophia. "A week ago, Sophia and I made a discovery that changed everything. Through a search that Sophia had begun months ago, we learned something neither of us could have anticipated." Sophia took the microphone next. "Many of you know I was adopted as a baby. What you don't know is that I've been searching for my birth parents for years. That search finally led me to my birth father." She paused, looking directly at Robert, a man I had already come to care for deeply, though in a very different way than I do now. A gasp went through the audience as understanding dawned. Robert spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. 28 years ago, I held my newborn daughter for 1 hour before giving her up for adoption. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I believed it was best for her. I never imagined that life would bring her back to me, or that I wouldn't recognize her when it did." Sophia wiped away a tear. "We've decided that instead of a wedding, today will be a celebration of reunion. A day to acknowledge the incredible way life has brought us full circle." Robert reached for her hand and she took it. "Today, I'm not gaining a wife as planned. Instead, I'm receiving an even greater gift, the daughter I never thought I'd know." There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Linda sobbed openly into her handkerchief while David wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his own eyes glistening. Friends and family members exchanged shocked glances, processing the revelation. "We've asked you here," Sophia continued, "to witness this new beginning, to help us celebrate finding each other, and to support us as we build the relationship we should have had all along." Robert took a small box from his pocket, not the ring box from his proposal, but something older, worn with time. "This belonged to your mother," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver locket. "I've kept it all these years, hoping someday I might have the chance to give it to you." He fastened the chain around Sophia's neck, his fingers trembling slightly. Inside the locket was a tiny photo of Diane, smiling radiantly during her pregnancy. "Thank you," Sophia whispered, touching the locket, then louder, for everyone to hear. "I'd like to introduce you all to my father, Robert Thompson." The crowd burst into applause, tentative at first, then growing stronger. What had begun as confusion transformed into celebration as guests rose to their feet, clapping and wiping away tears. David stepped forward again. "And now we invite you all to join us for a meal in celebration, not of a marriage, but of a reunion 28 years in the making." The reception that followed was unlike any wedding reception, yet filled with the same joy. The father-daughter dance, which had been planned as a moment between Sophia and David, became a dance for all three of them, Sophia beginning with David before he gracefully handed her to Robert halfway through. As evening fell, lanterns were lit around the property, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Sophia found a quiet moment alone with Robert on the dock, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. "How are you doing?" he asked. "It's been surreal," she admitted. "But in a good way, I think. People have been incredibly supportive." "They have," Robert agreed, "though I'm sure we'll be the subject of gossip for months to come." "Let them talk," Sophia said with a shrug. "We know what matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Robert spoke again. "I've been thinking about what happens next. For us." "Me too. I'd like to be part of your life, Sophia, in whatever way you're comfortable with. No pressure, no expectations." She turned to look at him. This man who had been her fiancé and was now her father. The transition should have been impossible, and yet somehow, sitting here beside him felt right in a way she couldn't explain. "I'd like that too," she said. We have a lot of catching up to do, 28 years worth. Where do we start? Sophia smiled. How about at the beginning? Tell me about my mother. What was she like? As stars began to appear in the darkening, Sky Robert told stories of Diane, her laugh, her love of thunderstorms, how she would sing off-key to the radio. Sophia listened, soaking in every detail of the woman she'd never known, asking questions and sharing her own stories in return. Guests began to depart, saying warm goodbyes and offering well wishes for their new journey. By midnight, only family remained. Sophia's adoptive parents, Robert and Sophia herself, gathered in the living room with cups of tea. So, David said, breaking a comfortable silence, what happens tomorrow? Sophia looked at Robert, then back to the parents who had raised her. Tomorrow we start figuring out what it means to be a family. All of us. Linda reached over to squeeze her hand. I think that sounds perfect. Later, as Sophia prepared to leave, she paused in the doorway. April 18th, she said to Robert. It's still a special date for us, just not in the way we expected. The cow. Day you were born and the day we found each other again, he agreed. I think we should celebrate it every year. I'd like that, Sophia said and hugged him, not as a lover but as a daughter, embracing her father for the first time. See? You tomorrow, Dad. The word felt strange on her lips, but right. As she drove away from what was supposed to have been the start of one life and was now the beginning of another, Sophia felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would be complicated, full of adjustments and explanations and redefined boundaries. But for the first time since making the discovery that had upended everything, she felt certain they would find their way. Sometimes the greatest love stories weren't romantic at all, but were about family, belonging, and coming home, to the place and the people where you were always meant to be.